What would happen if a forgotten letter from the past suddenly appeared after many years? In today's emotional English story, you will follow Noah, a lonely postman who discovers a mysterious letter that changes his life forever. This slow and easy English story is perfect for beginners who want to improve listening, vocabulary, pronunciation, and speaking skills naturally. Listen carefully and enjoy the forgotten letter. The Forgotten Letter. Learn English through story, Level 1. In a quiet seaside town filled with salty air and small fishing boats, there lived a young man named Noah. Noah was 20 years old. He worked at a small post office near the harbour. Every morning he organised letters, packed boxes, and delivered mail around the town using an old bicycle. The work was simple. The days felt repetitive, and secretly Noah often felt invisible. Most people barely noticed him. Shop owners nodded politely. Neighbours greeted him quickly. But after years of delivering letters, Noah began feeling like his life lacked purpose. Every evening he returned to his small apartment overlooking the sea. He ate dinner alone. He watched waves crash against rocks outside his window. Then he slept, before repeating the same routine the next morning. One rainy afternoon, while organising old mail inside the post office basement, Noah discovered a dusty, forgotten letter hidden behind a wooden shelf. The envelope looked very old. Its corners were yellow and damaged. Across the front, elegant handwriting read, "To Clara Bennett." There was no address, no phone number, no return information, only the name. Noah stared at the letter curiously. "Who forgot this here?" he whispered. His manager looked briefly at the envelope. "That thing has probably been there for years," he said carelessly. "We should throw it away." But something about the letter felt important to Noah. For reasons he could not explain, he slipped it carefully into his bag before leaving work. That night, heavy rain fell across the seaside town while Noah sat quietly beside his window examining the envelope. He wondered who Clara Bennett was. Why had the letter never been delivered? And who wrote it? Finally, after several minutes of hesitation, Noah carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper smelled old and fragile. Slowly, Noah began reading. "Dear Clara, if you are reading this letter, then perhaps life finally gave me another chance to speak honestly. There are many things I should have told you years ago. I should have told you how deeply I loved you. I should have told you how sorry I was for leaving without explanation. And I should have thanked you for believing in me during the hardest years of my life." Noah continued reading silently. The letter was emotional, beautiful, heartbreaking. The writer explained how fear and pride destroyed their relationship many years earlier. At the end of the letter, one final sentence appeared. "If life is kind enough to bring this letter to you someday, I hope you know you are always the best part of my life." Noah slowly lowered the paper. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. Something inside his chest felt heavy. The letter carried so much emotion, so much regret, and suddenly Noah felt determined to find Clara Bennett. The next morning, Noah began searching quietly around town. He asked elderly shop owners, fishermen near the harbour, people inside cafes, but nobody recognized the name immediately. Days passed. Still, Noah continued searching. Something about the forgotten letter stayed in his mind constantly. One evening, an old fisherman finally reacted. "Clara Bennett?" The man repeated slowly. "I knew someone with that name many years ago." Noah's eyes widened. "She used to live near the northern cliffs," the fisherman explained, "but that was decades ago." The next morning, Noah rode his bicycle toward the cliffs outside town. Cold ocean wind moved through the air. Seagulls cried above the waves. Near the edge of the cliffs stood a small white cottage surrounded by flowers. Noah walked slowly toward the door and knocked nervously. After several moments, an elderly woman opened the door. Her silver hair moved gently in the wind. "Yes," she asked kindly. Noah swallowed nervously. "Are you Clara Bennett?" The woman looked surprised. "Yes." Noah carefully removed the old envelope from his bag. "I think this belongs to you." The woman stared at the letter silently. Her hands began trembling slightly. For a long moment she could not speak. Then slowly tears filled her eyes. "Oh, my goodness," she whispered. Carefully, she invited Noah inside. The cottage felt warm and peaceful. Old photographs covered wooden shelves. A fireplace crackled softly nearby. Clara sat quietly beside the window while holding the letter carefully in her hands. "I waited many years for this," she admitted softly. Noah listened silently. Clara explained that many years earlier she had fallen deeply in love with a young sailor named Thomas. But one day, Thomas suddenly disappeared without explanation. Weeks became months. Months became years. Eventually, Clara believed he had forgotten her. But now, after all these years, the letter finally arrived. With trembling hands, Clara slowly opened the paper and began reading. Tears rolled gently down her face. Sometimes she smiled sadly, sometimes she closed her eyes quietly. When she finally finished reading, the room remained silent for several moments. "He loved me," she whispered. Noah nodded softly. Clara smiled through tears. "I always hoped he did." Outside the cottage window, waves crashed peacefully against the cliffs. The evening sky glowed orange above the sea, and for the first time in many years, Clara's heart finally felt at peace. Clara carefully folded the letter and held it close to her chest. For several quiet moments, neither she nor Noah spoke. Only the sound of ocean waves filled the peaceful cottage. Finally, Clara smiled softly. "You have no idea what this means to me." Noah looked around the small room quietly. Old books covered wooden shelves. Photographs stood beside candles near the fireplace. Everything inside the cottage felt frozen in time. Almost as if Clara had spent years protecting old memories. "Did you really wait all these years?" Noah asked gently. Clara nodded slowly. "Not every day," she admitted, "but part of my heart never stopped waiting." She stood carefully and walked toward a small cabinet near the window. From inside, she removed an old photograph. In the picture, a young woman with bright eyes stood beside a smiling young sailor wearing a navy coat. Clara handed the photograph to Noah. "That was us," she said softly. Noah studied the picture carefully. They looked happy, young, hopeful. "What happened to him?" Noah asked quietly. Clara sat down slowly. "Thomas dreamed of traveling the world," she explained. "He joined a large ship company when we were young. At first they wrote letters constantly. Thomas sent stories from distant countries, beautiful beaches, busy cities, storms at sea, and every letter ended with promises of returning home someday. But then, suddenly the letters stopped. Weeks passed without news, then months. Clara feared something terrible happened, but no official report ever arrived. Eventually, people encouraged her to move on with life. Some believed Thomas abandoned her, others believed he died at sea. "But I never truly knew the truth," Clara whispered. Noah looked toward the old letter again. "At least now you know he still cared about you." Clara smiled sadly. "Yes," she whispered, "and somehow that matters more than I expected." Outside, evening rain slowly began falling across the cliffs. Noah realized it was getting late. He stood politely. "I should probably go," but Clara gently stopped him. "Please stay for tea," she said kindly. Noah hesitated before smiling. "All right?" Soon warm tea filled the cozy cottage with comforting smells. As rain tapped softly against the windows, Clara shared more stories about her younger years. She spoke about dancing beside the harbour during summer festivals, watching sunsets with Thomas near the sea, dreaming together about the future. Noah listened carefully. For the first time in many years, Clara spoke openly about those memories, and strangely, Noah felt grateful simply listening. When Noah finally left the cottage later that night, the rain had stopped. Cold wind moved across the dark cliffs, while moonlight reflected across the ocean below. As Noah rode his bicycle slowly back toward town, something inside him felt different. For years, he believed his job was small and meaningless. But because of one forgotten letter, someone finally found peace after decades of unanswered questions. That thought stayed in Noah's heart. The next morning, he returned to work feeling strangely lighter. For the first time in years, the small post office looked different to him. Every letter carried emotions: hope, love, fear, apologies, good news, bad news, human connection. Noah suddenly realized he was not simply delivering paper, he was delivering pieces of people's lives. Days later, Noah visited Clara again. This time, she greeted him warmly before he even knocked. "I baked too much bread again," she laughed softly. "Please help me eat some." Noah smiled. Soon, visiting Clara became part of his routine. Sometimes they drank tea while watching storms over the sea. Sometimes Clara showed him old photographs and letters, and sometimes they simply sat quietly beside the fireplace listening to music. Slowly, Noah stopped feeling lonely. Clara also seemed happier. For years she spent most days alone inside the cottage, but now laughter returned to the quiet rooms. One afternoon Noah asked gently, "Did you ever marry?" Clara looked toward the ocean silently for a moment. "No," she answered honestly. "Because of Thomas?" Clara smiled softly. "Partly, but also because life moved quickly. Then suddenly many years had passed." Noah nodded quietly. Life really did move quickly. That evening, before Noah left, Clara handed him a small wooden box. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." Inside were dozens of old letters tied carefully with blue ribbon. "All from Thomas," Clara explained. Noah looked surprised. "You kept everyone?" Clara laughed softly. When someone truly touches your heart, small things become difficult to throw away. Noah carefully touched the old papers. Suddenly he thought about his own life, about how disconnected modern people often felt. Messages today were fast and temporary, but these handwritten letters felt alive somehow, personal, real. Weeks later, Noah started writing letters himself, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. He wrote to old friends he lost contact with. He wrote thoughtful birthday letters to family members. Sometimes he even left anonymous kind notes for people having difficult days. And unexpectedly, his life slowly changed. People smiled more warmly around him. Connections felt deeper. His world felt less empty. One cold autumn morning, Noah arrived at Clara's cottage carrying fresh flowers. But when he knocked on the door, nobody answered. A worried feeling entered his chest. Slowly, he opened the unlocked door and stepped inside. Clara sat peacefully near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket. She looked weak but smiled gently when she saw him. "I think I'm getting old," she joked softly. Noah sat beside her with concern. "You should see a doctor." Clara nodded weakly. Over the following weeks, Noah helped care for her. He brought groceries, cooked meals, read books aloud beside the fireplace. And during long evenings, Clara shared stories Noah had never heard before. Stories about war years, lost friendships, family memories, dreams she once carried. One evening while heavy rain fell outside, Clara looked at Noah thoughtfully. "You know," she said quietly, "that forgotten letter changed more than my life." Noah looked confused. Clara smiled softly. "It changed yours too." Noah stayed silent, because deep inside he knew she was right. The letter helped him understand something important. Human connection gives life meaning, not money, not popularity, not perfection, but real connection. Weeks later, Clara's health slowly improved. The doctor said she simply needed rest and care. Noah felt relieved. One sunny afternoon, they walked slowly together beside the cliffs overlooking the sea. The ocean sparkled beautifully beneath golden sunlight. Clara breathed deeply and smiled. "For many years I thought my story ended sadly," she admitted. Then she looked warmly at Noah. "But sometimes life surprises us when we least expect it." Noah smiled quietly. Far below, waves crashed endlessly against the rocks. Seagulls flew peacefully across the bright sky. And for the first time in many years, both of them felt less alone. Because one forgotten letter had connected two lonely people from different generations. And in doing so, it quietly changed both of their lives forever. As the seasons changed, Noah and Clara became like family to each other. The small white cottage near the cliffs no longer felt lonely. Warm laughter often filled the rooms. Fresh flowers stood beside the windows. Soft music played quietly during rainy evenings. And for the first time in many years, Clara no longer spent her days completely alone. For Noah, life also felt different now. He still worked at the post office every morning. He still delivered letters across the quiet seaside town using his old bicycle. But now, every street felt more meaningful. Every envelope carried a story. Every package carried emotions from one person to another. Sometimes Noah imagined the people behind the letters, a mother writing to her son, a student waiting for university news, a soldier missing home, a grandfather sending birthday wishes. Small pieces of human life traveled through his hands every day. And suddenly, his simple job no longer felt small. One windy afternoon, Noah arrived at Clara's cottage carrying groceries. But this time, Clara looked unusually thoughtful. "What happened?" Noah asked gently. Clara smiled weakly. "I was thinking about Thomas again." Noah sat beside her quietly. Clara carefully removed another photograph from an old wooden drawer. In the picture, Thomas stood smiling beside a large ship. "He always dreamed about adventure," Clara whispered. Then she looked toward the ocean outside the window. I used to feel angry at him for disappearing. Noah listened silently, but after reading the letter, Clara continued softly, I realized life is more complicated than we understand. Noah nodded slowly. Sometimes people leave because of fear, sometimes because of mistakes, sometimes because life pulls them away unexpectedly, and sometimes people carry regrets they never find courage to explain. Clara sighed quietly. I wish I could have spoken to him one last time. The room became silent, except for the sound of distant waves. Then Noah suddenly asked, What if we learn more about him? Clara looked surprised. What do you mean? The letter mentioned his ship company, Noah explained. Maybe records still exist somewhere. For the first time in many years, hope appeared in Clara's eyes again. The next morning, Noah began researching old ship company records online at the town library. The search took hours. Most information was incomplete. Some records were damaged or missing. But Noah refused to stop searching. Finally, late in the evening, he discovered something surprising. Thomas's ship had experienced a terrible storm many years earlier near another country's coastline. Several crew members survived. Others disappeared for months before finally returning home. Noah continued reading carefully. One sentence caught his attention immediately. Crew member Thomas Hale later relocated overseas after long-term medical recovery. Noah's heart raced. Thomas survived. The next day, Noah rushed to Clara's cottage carrying printed papers. Clara's hands trembled while reading the information. He lived, she whispered. Tears slowly filled her eyes again. For all these years, he lived. Noah sat quietly beside her. Clara smiled sadly. I spent so many years believing he abandoned me. Noah gently placed the old letter beside her. Maybe he wanted to come back, but couldn't. Clara nodded silently. Pain and peace mixed together inside her expression. At least now, the mystery was finally ending. Weeks later, Noah continued searching for more information. Eventually, he discovered that Thomas had passed away several years earlier in another country. He never married, and according to local records, he kept a small collection of old letters and photographs until the end of his life. When Noah gently shared the news with Clara, she became very quiet. For a long moment she stared toward the ocean outside the window. Then finally she smiled softly through tears. He never forgot me either. Noah nodded. No, I don't think he ever did. That evening, Clara and Noah sat together beside the cliffs watching sunset colors spread across the sea. Golden light reflected beautifully across the waves. For the first time in decades, Clara's heart no longer carried endless questions. Sadness still remained, but peace had finally arrived beside it. One day, while cleaning the post office basement again, Noah discovered several more forgotten boxes filled with old undelivered letters. Most workers ignored them carelessly. But Noah looked at them differently now. Each letter represented unfinished emotions, words someone once needed to say. And suddenly Noah had an idea. Over the following months, Noah began carefully tracking old undelivered mail whenever possible. Sometimes recipients had moved away, sometimes they had passed away. But occasionally, Noah successfully reunited people with forgotten letters from years earlier. One elderly man cried after receiving a letter written by his brother before his death. A woman smiled while reading an old postcard sent by her childhood friend decades earlier. A retired teacher received a thank you letter from a former student that had never arrived. Slowly, stories about Noah spread throughout the town. People began calling him the postman who delivers lost memories. At first, Noah felt embarrassed by the nickname, but secretly, it made him proud. Because for the first time in his life, he truly felt useful. One afternoon, while Noah delivered mail near the harbour, a young boy stopped him. "Are you the postman from the newspaper?" the boy asked excitedly. Noah looked confused. "What newspaper?" The boy handed him a folded article. On the front page appeared a photograph of Noah standing beside his bicycle outside the post office. The article explained how he reunited people with forgotten letters and memories. Noah laughed nervously. He never expected attention. That evening, Clara proudly showed him several neighbours discussing the newspaper article. "You became famous," she teased gently. Noah smiled shyly. "I only delivered letters." Clara shook her head softly. "Noah, you delivered closure. That's different." Her words stayed in his heart. Months later, the town organised a small community celebration near the harbour. Music filled the streets. Lanterns glowed warmly across the evening sky. Families gathered together, laughing and talking beside food stands. During the celebration, the mayor invited Noah onto a small stage unexpectedly. Noah looked shocked. The crowd applauded warmly. The mayor smiled proudly. "In a world where people often feel disconnected," he said, Noah reminded this town about the importance of human connection. Noah felt emotional, standing beneath the glowing lights. Then the mayor handed him something surprising, a small golden plaque. Engraved across the front were simple words. "Every letter carries a heart." The crowd applauded again. Noah looked toward Clara, standing near the front, smiling proudly through tears. At that moment, he realized something deeply important. Purpose does not always arrive through grand success. Sometimes purpose quietly enters life through small acts of kindness. Late that night, after the celebration ended, Noah and Clara walked slowly beside the quiet harbour. Moonlight reflected across the calm sea. Fishing boats moved gently with the waves. Clara smiled peacefully. "You know," she said softly, "Thomas would have liked you." Noah laughed quietly. "I wish I could have met him." Clara looked toward the stars above the ocean. Maybe somehow, life allowed your paths to cross anyway. Noah thought about the forgotten letter, about loneliness, about human connection, about how one small decision completely changed his life. Then he smiled. Because sometimes the smallest moments become the moments that change everything forever.